When it comes to my personal taste in video games, fighting games will always stand as the king above them all. Games like Vampire Savior, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and Rivals of Aether stand as games I not only hold dear to my heart, but as games I will always return to, either to have a few matches with friends, or to simply indulge in the nostalgia of it all. However, while fighting games are my favorite, it's not the genre that I've put the most time into. That honor goes to MMOs, and as of right now, my current MMO of choice is Final Fantasy XIV. While I've never really been connected to Final Fantasy as a franchise, Final Fantasy XIV's unique spin on old Final Fantasy lore, along with my previous experiences with MMOs, allowed me to mesh quite well with the game, and while I certainly have my gripes with it, I'm still leveling classes and making new alts, even if my character ended up looking like a furry version of Solid the Snake from Metal Gear Solid 2. Regardless, as Final Fantasy XIV is the Final Fantasy I'm most associated with, if I were to request a Final Fantasy character to be added into Smash Bros., this is definitely the one I would pull from. I can already hear you asking though. It's an MMO with a heavy focus on the player's character involvement and importance to the world around them. How do you add a character from a game like that and make it work? Well, originally, I'd say it'd probably be quite difficult, especially since the main character is constantly shown to switch styles with each expansion's release. But thankfully, the folks over at Square Enix decided to give the spotlight to a popular side character in order to represent Final Fantasy XIV in their latest Dissidia title. And that character was none other than the quick-witted and silver-tongued Miqo'te, Y'shtola. And it's not hard to understand why. With a great personality, a strong presence in nearly every scene she's a part of, and a well-defined character evolution over the current expansions, Y'shtola truly is a diamond in the rough, and most fans would tend to agree, seeing how much art there is of this character. With that introduction out of the way, it's time to get started. This is Y'shtola for Super Smash Bros. Y'shtola! Y'shtola is a zoning-oriented stance change character who can utilize two distinct playstyles to either overwhelm opponents with sustained damage and incredible utility, or blow away anyone in her path with extreme amounts of damage in quick bursts. With a plethora of magical abilities at her disposal, Y'shtola has the potential to deal damage and pressure her opponents from all ranges, but as she is a mage at heart, she will in turn come with a lot of the issues that often comes with the class, no matter what game they're a part of. In exchange for offense and longevity, Y'shtola ends up lacking defensive options designed to push her opponent out once they've gotten too close. And when you mix that with a low weight class, you end up with a character that might spell her own end should she end up making a single mistake. As a result, spacing is very important when playing as Y'shtola, and the better the player can hold their opponent at bay, the better chance they have at landing her most powerful abilities. Y'shtola stands as a medium-sized humanoid character, her size being comparable to that of Robin. In terms of her basic animations, Y'shtola will pull a lot from not only Final Fantasy XIV, but her appearance in Dissidia as well. Y'shtola's idle and walk animations are inspired by the animations used by both the White Mage and Black Mage jobs in Final Fantasy XIV, as well as her idle and walking animation from Dissidia, while her run is inspired by Dissidia's flying dash, making Y'shtola yet another Final Fantasy character who flies for their run. Y'shtola will also pull from a few of the animations of the Miqo'te of Final Fantasy XIV, including shifting between some of their idle poses used by the female Miqo'te during her basic stance, as well as their cat-like jumping pose where they hold their hands up close to their face. This is all thanks to the fact that, while she's an important character with her own unique clothes, hair, and voice, she's still rigged like that of a player Miqo'te, meaning they share the same animation sets. In terms of mobility options, Y'shtola has two jumps, along with a wall jump. As previously mentioned, Y'shtola is a stance-changing character, and this is also the heart of her character mechanic, which is known as job change. In Final Fantasy XIV, the player can choose to start as one of 8 different jobs once they create their character, with 9 other jobs becoming accessible as the player progresses through the game and reaches a certain level range. However, since the player can have access to all jobs at once on a single character, swapping between each job when the time comes for it is a common occurrence in Final Fantasy XIV. Here in Smash Bros., Y'shtola is capable of swapping between 2 different jobs, those being White Mage and Black Mage. White Mage is a healer job that is based around survivability and attrition, allowing Y'shtola to heal her wounds, along with granting her a surprising amount of burst damage should the player play their cards right. Then there's Black Mage, which is considered one of the strongest jobs in Final Fantasy XIV in terms of its potential to deal high amounts of raw damage. What this job lacks in defense, it more than makes up for in pure offensive strength. Although the desire to land those big powerful attacks might lead to poor judgment on her player's part. Both of these jobs depend on mana in order to be effective, and while their mana usage is drastically different, they share the same mana bar, so proper mana management is important when playing as Y'shtola. Both jobs will also feature their own exclusive costume, as while in White Mage stance, Y'shtola's costume is her outfit from Haven's Ward and Stormblood, while her Black Mage outfit is her sorceress costume that she dons in Shadowbringers and, soon, Endwalker. When it comes to their similarities, both White Mage and Black Mage will utilize the same normals, albeit with some slight statistical differences and exceptions in certain areas. Black Mage's attacks are slightly faster, but they have a shorter range. Meanwhile, White Mage's attacks are slower but either have a longer range or an extra effect to compensate for their longer startup time. Both jobs are designed to play off of one another's strengths in order to thrive on the battlefield. And while it's more than possible for a player to win while only using one job, switching between them is highly encouraged in order to get the most out of what the character has to offer. This is made apparent by the unique character mechanics that also comes with each job, those being their job gauges. In Final Fantasy XIV, a majority of jobs have an additional gauge of some sort that is designed to keep track of a resource. These resources can be used to do anything from deal extra damage to extend combos to even defend oneself from damage, and Black Mage and White Mage are no exception. In Smash, Black Mage will utilize its elemental gauge from Final Fantasy XIV, while White Mage will utilize an altered version of the healing gauge the job received in Haven's Ward, both gauges being visible above Y'shtola's percent bar and resetting each time the player switches between the 2 available jobs. Let's talk about that now, shall we? Starting with Black Mage, the elemental gauge is designed to work in tandem with the job's 2 main abilities, Blizzard and Fire. Casting a Fire spell will activate the effects of Astral Fire, while casting a Blizzard spell will activate the effects of Umbral Ice. Both of these states being shown through glowing pips that will light up along the top left side of the gauge. Both states can have up to 3 pips lit up at once, with each additional pip adding on to the potency of the effect. Astral Fire will increase the damage of your spells, while in turn making them cost more mana for each pip activated. At max pips, Astral Fire will drain your mana extremely quickly, and at this point, mana will not regenerate naturally. It's at this point where it might be time to swap to Umbral Ice. Umbral Ice will dramatically increase mana regeneration, with each pip not only speeding up regeneration, but lowering the amount of mana required to cast a spell. At max pips, Umbral Ice will make all Blizzard-related spells require no mana to cast, all while recovering nearly half a bar's worth of mana every second. Once you're topped off, it's time to swap back to Astral Fire in order to unleash some big damage. The elemental gauge also has some extra functions outside of Astral Fire and Umbral Ice, but this will be discussed in more detail when we get to Y'shtola's specials. So let's now move on to White Mage's healing gauge. In Final Fantasy XIV, the healing gauge essentially functioned as an additional healing resource for the player to use outside of their mana pool, it later adding on a big damaging ability once enough lilies had been used by the player. Here in Smash, things work a bit differently, for the player will not make use of lilies, but will instead utilize healing spells in order to nourish the Blood Lily. Once the player has used Cure a certain amount of times, the Blood Lily will be nourished and the player will gain access to a new ability in the form of a Flatus Misery. Once used, the Blood Lily will need to be nurtured once again. Managing two different gauges might be considered a tad difficult for some folks, so don't be afraid to just stick to one if it means getting a better grasp for the character. That's all you need to know about the mechanics of Y'shtola, so now let's move on to talking about her normals. Y'shtola's normals are mainly attacks using her staff, utilizing a mixture of physical combat and elemental damage. For this section, I'll describe the move in detail and then list off the main differences between both jobs. Neutral combo is Seeker combo, Y'shtola swiping twice with her staff before transitioning into one of two attacks. For Black Mage, she'll perform a rapid jab by producing a fireball on the end of her staff, while White Mage will launch a projectile forward using Stone, dealing long-range damage and launching the opponent backwards. Forward tilt is Seeker Stab, Y'shtola thrusting her staff forward like that of a spear in order to knock the foe away. Black Mage will utilize an Icicle Spear at its tip in order to give this move tipper damage, while White Mage will utilize a Ball of Arrow in order to deal rapid damage and push the foe back far. All arrow-based attacks also have a wind box associated with it. Up tilt is Seeker Crescent, Y'shtola swinging her staff up over her head in order to deal damage and halt the approach of airborne opponents. Black Mage will create a trail of fire as she swings, while White Mage will attack while utilizing a wave of stones, giving this version of the move even more range. Down tilt is Seeker Spark, Y'shtola waving her staff down along the ground in order to create a burst of elemental damage in front of her, this elemental blast launching foes upwards and dealing serious damage. Black Mage will create a burst of crystalline ice in order to launch foes away, while White Mage will summon up a stone from the ground, this armored attack launching foes straight up into the air. Dash attack is Seeker Lance, which will have Y'shtola rush forward with her staff out in front of her, launching all foes away in her path with force. Black Mage will deal rapid damage as she rushes forward in a stream of lightning, while White Mage will rush forward in a burst of wind, allowing her to move faster and further than Black Mage. For her get-up attack, Y'shtola will strike on either side of herself, while her ledge attack will have her stab forwards with her staff. Both jobs will share the same versions of these attacks. Y'shtola's smash attacks is the one area outside of her specials where both jobs gain access to unique attacks, these moves being some of the more powerful abilities utilized by both jobs in Final Fantasy XIV. White Mage's forward smash is Glare, while Black Mage's forward smash is Flare. Glare will have Y'shtola converge a series of light balls on a single location, causing them to explode outward and deal serious damage to any opponent at the center of the impact. Meanwhile, Flare will have Y'shtola unleash a massive ball of flame in front of her, it dealing rapid damage before it launches its opponent away. While Flare in Final Fantasy XIV would expunge all of the user's mana, here in Smash it simply just deals big damage and activates Astral Fire. White Mage's up smash is Rock 4, while Black Mage's up smash is Despair. Rock 4 will have Y'shtola summon up a pillar of smooth, square-like rocks that will deal damage to all opponents in its path, the rocks then bursting outwards and launching all caught foes flying skywards. Meanwhile, Despair will have Y'shtola release a huge burst of power up from the ground, dealing rapid yet heavy damage to all nearby opponents before launching them up into the air. Much like Flare, Despair will activate Astral Fire once used. Finally, White Mage's down smash is Holy, while Black Mage's down smash is Freeze. Holy will have Y'shtola raise her staff up over her head, a bright ball of light exploding outwards and launching foes away with serious force. And as a callback to the actual Holy ability from Final Fantasy XIV, this move does a ton of shield damage as it is designed to stun. Meanwhile, Freeze will have Y'shtola summon forth a swirling vortex of ice and snow, dealing rapid damage to all nearby opponents before launching them away. Also, much like Flare and Despair activate Astral Fire, Freeze will activate Umbral Ice once used. Y'shtola's aerials, like her grounded normals, are mainly attacks utilizing her staff, with both White Mage and Black Mage having their own unique variations for each attack. Neutral air is Seeker Spinner, Y'shtola spinning her staff around herself rapidly in order to deal damage. White Mage will add on to this rapid hitting attack with a wave of arrow, giving this move even more knockback. As for Black Mage, Y'shtola will instead use a ball of flame on the tip of her staff, this ball knocking opponents back and turning this move into a single hit attack with a long-lasting hitbox. Forward air is Seeker Wave, Y'shtola waving her staff out in front of her in order to deal damage. Black Mage will have Y'shtola summon a wave of lightning in front of her while she swings, dealing rapid damage before launching the foe away, while White Mage will attack with a wave of stones, giving this move more launch power and range. Up air is Crystal Tower, Y'shtola stabbing her staff up through the air in order to hit foes above her. As Black Mage, Y'shtola will emit an icicle from the tip of her staff to give this move a tipper, and a great way to confirm a kill. As for White Mage, Y'shtola will summon a ball of arrow at the tip of her staff, this move dealing rapid damage before launching the foe upwards. Back air is Seeker Burst, this move having Y'shtola turn around in mid-air and release a burst of energy from her staff, both versions of this attack serving as solid stock closers. Black Mage will release a blast of fire, making this move almost like that of Piranha Plant's back air. As for White Mage, Y'shtola will unleash a blast of arrow, this move dealing rapid damage before it sends its opponent soaring. Finally, down air is Seeker Burial, Y'shtola smashing her staff downward and meteor smashing her opponent into the abyss below. Both versions of this attack share roughly the same attack power, with Black Mage using a block of ice and White Mage using a stone, but White Mage's spike power is slightly stronger. Y'shtola will grab with her free hand, all while releasing a small magical burst from her hand in order to pummel. Both of Y'shtola's jobs will share the same throws, but their damage and launch power will vary between each job. Y'shtola's forward throw will have her jab her staff into her opponent, all before she sends them flying with an elemental blast. As Black Mage, this blast will be fire and deal more damage, while as White Mage, this blast will be arrow and have stronger knockback, this acting as a kill throw. Y'shtola's up throw will have her summon an elemental burst at her opponent's feet, launching them up into the air, with Black Mage summoning a block of ice, while White Mage will summon a large stone. Both of these throws are nearly identical, save for slightly more damage from Black Mage's version. Y'shtola's down throw will have her smash her opponent into the ground with the end of her staff, utilizing either a stone or a block of ice depending on what job is currently active. Black Mage's version of this throw will spike the opponent hit off the floor and set up for possible combos, while White Mage's version will bury the opponent. Finally, Y'shtola's back throw will have her hook her opponent on her staff, moving them behind her before sending them flying with either an electrical discharge from Black Mage or an arrow blast from White Mage. Like her forward throw, the Black Mage version will deal more damage, but the White Mage version will have more launch power. Y'shtola's specials are where both of her jobs are fully fleshed out. Both of these playable options featuring a wide variety of abilities available to them that completely sets them apart from one another. Their attacks, their utility, their way of recovering, all of it is completely different from one another save for two key abilities shared by both jobs. Y'shtola's standard special is an ability table for both jobs, each table having 5 abilities each. For Black Mage, these abilities are Fire, Blizzard, Transpose, Eorzea, and Surecast, while for White Mage, these abilities are Cure, Regen, Fluid Aura, Repose, and Surecast. Holding the B button will bring up the ability table around Y'shtola, the player then being able to choose which ability they want to use by moving the analog stick towards the ability's icon, much like Shulk's Monado Arts. Once the ability is selected, the player can tap the B button to use it, but it should be mentioned that any instant cast abilities will be used automatically once selected from the ability table. Now that you have an idea of how this table is supposed to work, let's discuss what each of these abilities do, starting with Black Mage. Black Mage's 2 main abilities are Fire and Blizzard, both of which can either be chosen by the player separately from the abilities table, or by using Transpose to instantly swap between the two and keep up the effects of Umbral Ice or Astral Fire. When either Fire or Blizzard is selected, the player can tap the B button to start charging up an attack, much like Samus's Charge Shot or Mewtwo's Shadow Ball. As Y'shtola charges, the magical effect on the end of Y'shtola's staff will change. each change signifying that Y'shtola's spell has entered its next state of power, much like Robin's Thunder Charge changing in color as it changes between the multiple versions of its attack. Normally, Fire and Blizzard have 3 different charge states, with Fire and Blizzard 1 being simple projectile attacks, Fire and Blizzard 2 being short-range attacks with a wide area of effect, while Fire and Blizzard 3 are big powerful stock closers that will deal huge chunks of damage. In Final Fantasy XIV, each of these abilities are split into separate attacks that Black Mage can use, but I felt it'd be more appropriate to take the Robin style in Smash and combine all of them into a single ability that the player can charge. In total, it takes a full second of charge time to use each version of the attack, with Fire and Blizzard 1 requiring 1 second, Fire and Blizzard 2 requiring 2 seconds, and Fire and Blizzard 3 requiring 3 seconds. These charges cannot be stored either, so if you want to deal big damage, you have to do it all in one go. As previously mentioned, Fire and Blizzard will also activate either Astral Fire or Umbral Ice, with Fire and Blizzard 3 automatically maximizing the potency of each state. Once each state activates, a timer of 10 seconds will be shown above the pips, this being down from the normal 15 seconds of Final Fantasy XIV. As long as the player keeps using these spells, the timer will reset and the effects of each state can be continued indefinitely, which is important as this plays into the third of Black Mage's abilities, Enochian. Enochian is an instant cast ability that, when used, will activate the second half of the Black Mage's elemental gauge, the Polyglot system. Polyglot is an extra resource that can be acquired through Enochian, the player being able to carry up to 2 polyglots at once. In order for the player to acquire a stack of Polyglot, Enochian must be kept active for at least 15 seconds, and in order to keep Enochian active, the player has to maintain either Umbral Ice or Astral Fire for set amount of time. This is all shown to the player by the clock hand that will count down from the right hand side of the gauge to the bottom, ticking every second until it reaches the end. Once the hand reaches the end, it will reset and a small purple diamond will be displayed under the elemental gauge, this being the visual cue that Y'shtola has officially stored to charge a Polyglot. In Final Fantasy XIV, Polyglot is mainly used for 2 different abilities, but here in Smash Bros, there is only one primary use for this resource, which is the 4th of Black Mage's abilities, Foul. Only becoming visible on her abilities table once she has a stack of Polyglot, Foul is an incredibly powerful spell that will deal damage to all opponents within an area of effect, although it will deal slightly less damage should it hit more than one opponent at a time. This is the most powerful of Y'shtola's Black Mage abilities, but Enochian gives her more bonuses than just Polyglot and Foul. When Enochian is active, Y'shtola's Fire and Blizzard spells will gain additional charge in the form of Fire 4 and Blizzard 4, both of these powerful spells dealing both big damage and covering a wide area of effect. While Blizzard and Fire 4 are available, the charge speed of both spells will be increased by 30%, meaning that it will take the same amount of time to charge to level 4 as it normally took to charge up to level 3. And once Enochian ends, it will go on cooldown, requiring the player to wait 10 seconds before they can use it again, so make sure you make it count. Finally, the 5th ability Black Mage can use is Surecast, an instant cast ability that will greatly increase the cast time of Y'shtola's next spell. In Final Fantasy XIV, this will be used to make the next spell the player used instant cast, which is common for healers as Surecast Resurrect is the staple way of bringing dead teammates back to life. Here in Smash, it will simply increase cast time by 80%, meaning the player can charge a spell to max power in the same time it would normally take to charge a single level. While powerful, Surecast has never been an ability the player uses unless they absolutely need to. And like in Final Fantasy XIV, Surecast will have a substantial cooldown period once the ability is used, it taking 20 seconds before the player can use it again. Next up is White Mage, and compared to Black Mage, White Mage's abilities are far more varied in terms of its options. Starting with Cure, this is the job's standard healing ability, Y'shtola recovering a small percent of her damage after a brief cast time. This spell is definitely useful in a game like Smash Bros, where percent is very valuable, but the cast time might make it hard to land constantly in an official match, especially since it can be interrupted by attacks and grabs. Try going for a Cure when you have your opponent either off screen or after securing a KO. Each Cure the player successfully uses will nurture the Blood Lily on their healing gauge. and once the player has gotten off 3 successful cures, the player will gain access to Afflatus Misery. This powerful AoE ability will cover a wide radius and damage all opponents in its range. And unlike Foul, Afflatus Misery will not split its damage amongst those being hit and do a set amount of damage. This ability is also immune to reflections and absorbs. If you're looking for something a bit more manageable in a high-paced match but with a smaller recovery than Cure, look no further than White Mage's second ability, Regen. This instant cast ability will put a small heal over time on Y'shtola, healing a total of 20% damage over the span of 10 seconds at a rate of 4% every 2 seconds. Once activated, it's impossible to stop Regen from healing the player, but keep in mind that your opponent is more than capable of out-damaging Regen's heal should you not play carefully. Moving away from healing abilities, White Mage's third ability is Fluid Aura. This instant cast spell will have Y'shtola release a wave of water in front of her, and should it come into contact with an opponent, it will deal minimal damage and root the target in place for a short period of time. This root can either set up the opponent for a potential KO or hold them off long enough to maybe get a cure off, but make sure you make it count, as this ability takes 15 seconds to recharge. Next is White Mage's fourth ability, Repose. A utility ability that will have Y'shtola release a cloud of mist in front of her after a brief casting period. Any opponent who enters this cloud of mist will be put to sleep, much like that of Jigglypuff's Sing. And unlike the likes of Fluid Aura, Repose is a spell that can be used multiple times in a row. Just keep in mind that Repose's mana cost is double the value of Cure and a third more than that of Regen, so it's best to not spam it and balance out its value with abilities that will help keep you alive. Finally, White Mage also shares Syrcus with Black Mage, it working nearly identically as Y'shtola's next spell will cast 80% faster. However, it should be mentioned that even though both jobs share the same ability, Syrcus cannot carry over between jobs. So if the player Syrcus on Black Mage, then switches to White Mage in order to heal, the Black Mage's Syrcus will end automatically and go into a cooldown state. Y'shtola's side special is also split into 2 different abilities for both jobs, these moves being unique attacks outside of the job's ability table, those being Lightning for Black Mage and Stone for White Mage. Starting with Black Mage, Lightning will have Y'shtola charge up and release a ball of pulsing electricity in front of her, and should it come into contact with an opponent, it will burst open and deal damage in an area of effect, allowing it to hit more than one opponent at once. On top of its initial damage, Lightning will put a damage over time effect on any opponent hit by the attack. Moving over to White Mage, Stone will have Y'shtola charge up magical energy before summoning a large spinning stone in front of her, it moving slowly forward, and, once it comes into contact with an opponent, it will burst outwards and deal serious damage. Inspired by Stone 3 from Final Fantasy XIV and Dissidia, this move is designed to help Y'shtola keep enemies from getting too close. Y'shtola's recovery special will vary between both jobs, with Black Mage utilizing Ley Lines and White Mage using Arrow 2. Starting with Black Mage, this multi-use special will work completely differently depending on certain conditions, as when standing on the ground, this move has a completely different purpose. This move will have Y'shtola summon a field of magic on the ground below her, this field increasing the damage and cast speed of Y'shtola's spells as long as she stands within the area of effect. However, when used offstage, Y'shtola will summon a magical field in a place of her choice before performing another one of Black Mage's abilities, Between the Lines. In Final Fantasy XIV, this ability allowed for the player to instantly move back to the location of their active ley line, and here in Smash, it works the exact same, this essentially acting like that of a teleport recovery. If a ley line is already active on the ground when Y'shtola uses this move, she will automatically move towards the active ley line, essentially making this move a guaranteed recovery if used properly. For White Mage, Y'shtola will take a moment to build up magical energy before soaring through the air like that of a bullet, dealing rapid-hitting wind damage to any opponent near the base of the launch. While Y'shtola can deal damage to foes by flying into them, opponents hit by the wind of Arrow 2 will be afflicted with a damage over time effect on top of its initial burst of damage, this being the common effect Arrow has on enemies in Final Fantasy XIV. In short, Black Mage's recovery is shorter range, but can be a guaranteed recovery if used properly, while White Mage's recovery has far longer range, but in exchange it is far easier to counter and punish. Y'shtola's down special is what allows for her to swap between her two playstyles, this being Job Change. In a spinning flash of her staff, Y'shtola's weapon and outfit will change to represent her current job, along with a class icon appearing above her head. And much like the way Pokemon Trainer switches Pokemon or Pyra swaps to Mythra, Y'shtola is capable of swapping these jobs on the fly, which is good as different situations require different jobs. Next is the Final Smash, and Y'shtola is the first Final Fantasy character to have different Final Smashes. Well, depending on who you ask anyways. Both of these Final Smashes are split between the two available jobs, with White Mage utilizing Aether Mastery and Black Mage utilizing Meteor. When Black Mage's Final Smash is activated, Y'shtola will call down a huge stream of small meteors towards the ground in front of her, all before calling down a massive meteor that will crash into the stage, dealing an enormous amount of damage to all nearby opponents and launching them away. This Final Smash is based off of a level 3 limit break that Black Mage and other ranged magic damage classes can utilize in Final Fantasy XIV, all while adding in an extra flair that shows Y'shtola's mastering over these destructive magics. For White Mage, Y'shtola will release a pulse of ethereal energy around herself, binding all enemies in place as she calls upon the very power of Eorzea itself. Mixing stone, water, and arrow together, she will create a massive ball of ethereal energy that, after a brief moment, will explode outwards, covering a wide radius and launching all caught foes with serious force. On top of dealing damage, this Final Smash will heal Y'shtola for 50% of her current damage value. This move is a reference to the lone time the player gets to control Y'shtola in Stormblood and the massive attacks she utilizes in order to fight against the Thimble of the Sun. When it comes to victory themes, Cloud already utilizes the victory fanfare from Final Fantasy VII. As a result, I've decided that the best choice for Y'shtola is the victory fanfare from Final Fantasy XIV, this playing at the end of all instanced content. Y'shtola's first victory animation will be split between her two jobs, showing off her mastery of their magics while giving a quote.
Perhaps combat is not your forte.
Y'shtola's second victory animation is based on her standard win animation from Dissidia, her hand resting under her chin as she gives a small quip about her performance.
I must say I performed admirably today.
Finally, Y'shtola's third victory animation will have her give a small remark before she activates Teleport, floating up into the air as she channels energy before disappearing in a flash of light.
Well, well. This has been a day of unexpected revelations.
Y'shtola's first taunt is based on the Flourish taunt of both Black Mage and White Mage, this taunt changing between the two jobs and allowing Y'shtola to show off.
Do not think me bested so easily.
Y'shtola's second taunt is based on her intro animation from Dissidia, having her point her staff forwards towards her foe as she lets out a small quip.
The fight has scarce begun.
Finally, Y'shtola's third taunt will have her pull out a book and search through it, looking up and giving a snarky comment about waiting for her opponent to approach her. As she looks up, she will toss the book over her shoulder, it disappearing in a puff of smoke.
Less provoking and more pummeling, if you would be so kind.
As she has two main costumes, Y'shtola's color palettes end up sharing two apiece, all save for three, which are special palettes only featuring one costume. Y'shtola's first color is her standard appearance for her Haven's Ward and Shadowbringers outfits. White Mage decorating Y'shtola in a long white robe, black shorts, and thigh-high boots, while Black Mage adorns her in a distinguished sorceress's robe, along with a pair of feather earrings and laced-up black boots. Y'shtola's second color is based on her alternate color palettes from Dissidia, changing her Scion robe to a deep red while also doing the same for her sorceress's robe. Y'shtola's third color is based on her second alternate color palettes from Dissidia, this changing her Scion coat to a faded purple with bright blue highlights while changing her sorceress's robe to a bright blue. Y'shtola's fourth color is completely unique to Smash Bros., this changing her Scion robe to a deep green while changing her sorceress's robe to a vibrant purple. Y'shtola's fifth color will swap the color palettes of her main outfits around, her Scion robe taking on the deep black color scheme of her sorceress's robe, while her sorceress's robe becomes a snow white with various black and red highlights. Finally, colors 6 through 8 will allow the player to pick and choose which outfit they like the best and stick with it regardless of what job you're in. So if you like her outfit from Haven's Ward, you can keep this outfit while also playing as Black Mage, and vice versa. This also adds Y'shtola's old ARR outfit to the lineup, this outfit also staying the same as both White Mage and Black Mage. Also, when Kirby absorbs Y'shtola, he'll gain a copy of her hair, ears, and facial markings while also gaining access to a single ability depending on the job. If Kirby absorbs Y'shtola when she's in Black Mage stance, he'll gain Lightning, and if he absorbs her while she's in White Mage stance, he'll gain Stone. When it comes to voicing my opinions on things relating to Final Fantasy, I feel like I'm in a bit of an odd place. On one hand, I feel that I've not only learned a lot about the franchise through playing Final Fantasy XIV, but that the game in and of itself is going to retain attention and popularity far after the release of future Final Fantasy titles. Hell, it's already done that with Final Fantasy XV coming and going. On the other hand, however, I'm well aware of other games in the franchise, and while I might not have ever played them myself, I understand why they're a big deal and how much people want to see these characters added to a game like Smash Bros., especially after the fact that their sole representation is from a single game in a 15-game long lineage. Long story short, if Final Fantasy were to get more representation in Smash Bros., I'm highly doubtful that it'd be anything from Final Fantasy XIV. If anything, I feel it would be more content from Final Fantasy VII, and while that means Y'shtola's chances are low, I feel her popularity will definitely get her placed in more crossover titles in the future. If you like what you saw, feel free to like and subscribe, as there's more content coming in the future. Also, follow me over on Twitter where you can keep up to date on what's coming next while indulging in the content I made for my many side hobbies. And by that, I mean indulge in the drought that is currently happening. I'm so sorry. I'll be seeing you again soon, so until then, take care, stay safe, and have a good one.